We'll do.
Okay, great. Anyway, so I'm Marjorie Lewis, as Arlene mentioned, Marjorie Herrera Lewis. I was born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and both my parents were big sports fans, and so they passed that along to me. My dad, he was a pitcher in baseball, and he played on a high school state football team. And then, of course, in the 1940s, when they graduated from high school, my mother didn't have a lot of sports opportunities, but she was very athletic. And so she was a good swimmer and a tennis player. And then in adult life, she became a good bowler and a good golfer. And so she passed those on to us too. So I'm one of five siblings, and we love to play golf and love to bowl and love football and baseball and basketball and everything they passed along to us. So that's how it kind of my interest got started, because as a child, I enjoyed watching sports on TV, and then I enjoyed playing them. Now, as you can see, I'm a product of the 70s, and so I didn't have a lot of sports opportunities then, but Title IX was just coming into play. Pretty much right after I graduated from high school, everything went full blown with girls varsity sports, but I played while they were club sports. And so in high school, I played basketball, softball, and I played flag football, and now I'm involved in flag football and bringing professional flag football to the world. And then I also bowled and played volleyball, and I was on the tennis team, but I wasn't any good. So it's kind of, I shouldn't even mention tennis. But anyway, so people used to ask me all the time, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I always had a feeling that I wanted to do something in sports. I knew that at 5'2", and at that time about 98 pounds, I wasn't going to be any kind of Olympian basketball player, although that would have been a nice goal. That was it could have been a goal of mine, although I knew it would have been unrealistic. But I decided that I would combine two of my loves together and build a career, my love of sports and my love of writing. And so I became a sports writer. I graduated from Arizona State University and worked immediately with a magazine in Phoenix that Sun Devils covered the ASU sports. And then I moved to Dallas, and that's when I became a writer of a daily newspaper. And so my first job was with the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and then later I moved over to the Dallas Morning News. But it was while I was at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram that I started covering professional football. I covered a lot of things, but we'll focus today on professional football, the NFL and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, up to that time, they had never had a woman beat writer before covering the Dallas Cowboys. And so what makes that interesting is because today you see women in sports and NFL on sidelines and everything very commonly. But back when I started doing it in 1986 is when I became a Dallas Cowboys beat writer. I was the first one. It was very unusual for women to cover sports teams. So I found out only about maybe 5 years ago that Tom Landry had gathered the team together and had it as what I was told 15 minutes with the team. I was told he never spent 15 minutes on anything outside of football, but he talked for 15 minutes with the team and told them, we're now going to have a woman sports writer, and so she's going to be everywhere, which is true. I covered all their games, all their exhibition games, all their practices. I went to Europe when they played the Bears in 1986. It was the first time the NFL played in Europe. And of course, that meant I was going to be going into the locker room, which everybody asks me about. And fortunately, I have no horrifying stories to tell you, because Tom Landry told them that, now we're going to operate a little bit differently. And so everybody was very professional, and there were no embarrassing situations. But it did take a while for the team to fully acclimate to having a woman beat writer. The real professionals didn't have a problem. It was some of the rookies that were just coming out of college that hadn't really quite matured enough to understand that things were changing. But just so you get a sense, this was in the 80s, and so the team, you might remember some of these people if you followed or cared about the NFL or the Cowboys, but Tom Landry was the head coach. Tex Schramm at that time was the general manager, and the quarterback was Danny White. This was back in the days when Tony Dorsett was playing, and Randy White, Too Tall Jones. It was that era. So I really got to know those guys very well. In fact, a number of them, I could just call right now and ask them if they would show up at a charitable event that I'm hosting or something, and they would do it. So we developed a strong professional relationship that has sustained itself to today. But here's the thing. So I go in the locker room the first day after practice, and everybody's just kind of milling around. Now, let me give you an idea of what it looked like. Now, most of the locker rooms that you see, they're big square. You've probably been in them if you've played sports. And the lockers are all in the periphery. Well, at that time, the Cowboys had 4 quadrants that were open to a middle aisle. And each of the 4 quadrants had different position players, okay? So we've got these 4 quadrants in the middle aisle. And the newspaper people didn't go into the quadrants unless they were doing an interview. We pretty much stayed around the middle aisle and the periphery. So just picture that. So I show up the first day and I see the layout. The second day, I guess Tom Landry had ordered them in advance, but they hadn't yet arrived by the first day. The second day, every quadrant had a big curtain in front of it. So all 4 quadrants were covered by curtains. And then there were signs all over that said, do not leave cubicle areas without clothing. So that contributed to the fact that there were no embarrassing situations. So I'm going to give you 2 contrasting stories so that will give you a sense of how I was received and how I covered the team. So I go to my first training camp in the summer of '86. And in those days, the rookies and the free agents showed up the first week, and then the veterans would come in the second week for the remainder of the training camp. So I get there my first week, and I'm there the first day, and we've got the rookies and free agents. They'd never seen me. I started covering the team in February, shortly after the Super Bowl. So the veterans were familiar with seeing me around during the off season, but now I get to this training camp and none of the rookies and free agents have seen me. So I'm covering the practice and I'm standing on the sidelines. They're doing some drills and practicing, and I'm taking notes because I'm going to write a big feature story, but then I'm going to write a separate story about who looked really outstanding in practice. And, there are some that look like they probably don't really belong there or won't be there very long. So I'm keeping my notes, and practice ends and I'm walking to my workstation on the campus of California Lutheran College in Thousand Oaks, California. So I'm walking back to my workstation, and now just imagine this. Can you hear the cleats on concrete? Okay, only single person. I'm walking to my area and I hear behind me the footsteps of one pair of cleats and the clicking, and it's coming toward me and it's walking faster. So I have a feeling somebody's trying to catch up with me. So I slow down, I stop, and I turn to my left, and this football player, a rookie, free agent trying to make the team, he walks up to me and he looks me right in the eyes and he says to me, "You don't belong here." Well, I had to think fast because, you never know if he's going to make the team or whatever, but I didn't think so. So I looked at him and I said, "I just watched you practice and I'm going to be here a lot longer than you are." Now, I'm generally a nice person, but when somebody walks up to you and looks you straight in the eyes and says, "You don't belong here," you have to defend yourself. So that's what I did. He was cut the next day and I never did see him again. So that's one of the reasons why I was put on the Cowboys beat. I was a student of the game and I could tell he really wasn't NFL quality. But okay, so that's a pushback experience where, maybe somebody wasn't real comfortable having me there. But then here's the more encompassing experience. And this tells you more about what the team was like and what my experience was like. So in the summer, the Cowboys go play the Bears in London at Wembley Stadium. And the Bears had just won the Super Bowl. They were coming off of that big 1985 Super Bowl championship with, Walter Payton and that wonderful team. So the Cowboys were getting a little bit older and they didn't really have the original, the strongest level of Too Tall Jones or Tony Dorsett, and Herschel Walker had joined the team by then. And so they weren't really at their best. And the Bears beat them pretty handily. I don't remember the score right off the top of my head, but I think they beat them by maybe 45-10 or something. It was quite lopsided in that exhibition game. And so the Cowboys always knew that I would come into the locker room, so they would not get out of their uniforms until I was gone. And so all of the media, now picture this is the first time the NFL has played in Europe, and so it's a big deal. It wasn't just the Dallas-Fort Worth media and the Chicago media covering this. Everybody across the country, in Canada and all over Europe and in Mexico, there were people covering this big NFL event not on American soil. So there were streams of journalists going in, and outside the door that leads to the building that goes to the locker room, they had a police officer there, and he would look at the credentials and let everybody go in. So he's just looking at everybody and saying, go on in, go on in, go on in. And then I came up and he just put his hand right in front of me and he says, you can't go in there. And I showed him my credential and I said, well, I'm a Cowboys beat writer and they know that I'll be there. And this is part of my job. I was sent all the way from Texas to be here to cover this game. I need to talk to the players. And he said, I don't care. You're not going in there. You can't go in there. And I'm just like, what am I going to do? This is my job. And, it was not cheap sending me to Europe for like over a week to do all the pregame. And now I've got the game. And so what happens, I'm standing out there by myself with this police officer who has no mercy for me. And Tom Landry walks out of the locker room and he comes outside and he says, Marjorie, what's going on? And I looked at Tom Landry and I said, he won't let me in. And so Tom Landry looks at this police officer and he says, it's okay for her to come in. She's one of us. Now, that was the first time I'd ever heard that I was a Dallas Cowboy. I made it. I was one of them. 5'2". By then I was probably about 110 pounds, but still. So anyway, he looks at Tom Landry and he says, she may be one of you in the United States, but she is not one of you here. So I was not a cowboy in London, but I was a cowboy in Dallas. Anyway, though, Tom Landry couldn't do anything. So he just tells me I'm sorry. And he goes back into the locker room and I'm stuck out there. And then just a couple minutes later, maybe a minute, Mike Renfro, one of the wide receivers with the Cowboys, he comes out and he says, Marjorie, what's going on? And I said, he won't let me in. So then Mike says, well, then who do you need to talk to? And I was like, oh my gosh. So I said, well, I need to talk to Tony Dorsett, and I need to talk to, Randy White and Danny White and, Everson Walls. And I start giving him a list. So Mike, a starting wide receiver, goes in to the locker room and gets those guys and says, Marjorie needs to talk to you. She can't come in. Come on outside. So they come outside and they give me all, now instead of me sitting in a crowd where I'm trying to get a quote from somebody that's like 10 rows and I'm in the back, I'm one-on-one talking to these guys and I'm asking my own questions and I'm getting my own story. And at one point, Mike Renfro looks over my shoulder and he sees the bus is with the Bears. It's getting ready to leave. And he says to me, Marjorie, do you need to talk to any of the Bears? Well, none of the reporters that were inside the locker room got to talk to the Bears because they were at the Cowboys locker room. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I told Mike, could you get Walter Payton and maybe Refrigerator Perry? And, I gave him a couple of names. And he actually went on the opponent's bus, got the guys out that I needed to talk to, came to me, and I got private interviews with them as well. So this was a great, happy ending. This was a happy ending. This tells you two contrasting stories. One who felt like I didn't belong there, but he didn't know me. And I'm not taking it personally. I just think he had never worked with women in a space that was typically only men. And so, okay. But the guys that did know me and saw my work every day, they saw it published in the paper, and I know they were reading it. Believe me, we know when they're reading it. They respected me, and they didn't believe that I didn't belong there. They did, and they told me many times, and that's why I still have really good relationships with so many of them, is that I was always honest, even though they were losing. They went 6-2 the first half of the season and 1-7 in the second half, and it broke their streak of over 20 years with a winning record. And it was a tough season. And they had problems at quarterback, and Steve Pallure had to take over. And, it was just not a typical Cowboys season at the time. So I had to write some tough stories, but that they always felt that I was fair and I always told the truth. I didn't sensationalize or anything like that. And I earned their respect, and I went on to cover the team for several years after that. But let me tell you something that I can backtrack, because I never even thought I would ever be a Dallas Cowboys beat writer. When I was hired in 1984 at the Star-Telegram, they had never hired a woman specifically to be a sports writer. Now, they had women working the desk and doing agate, which is that, scorecards, box scores, things like that. And occasionally they would ask that particular woman to cover a story here and there, but they had never hired a woman specifically to be a sports writer until I came on in 1984. And I'm talking to the sports editor who I was going to be reporting to. It was my first day, and he says to me, he asks me a lot of questions, but at one point he asks me, if you're ever put on the Dallas Cowboys beat, how would you approach it? And I told him, well, I would approach it no differently than how I cover college athletes or how I've covered high school athletes in the past. I would always remember that they're people first. I would be honest, tell the truth, but never forget that they're human beings first. And my sports editor, who I was on my first day and I was going to be reporting to, looked at me and said, "You will never make it in this business." And I'm thinking, what? Do journalists have to forget that people that they're covering are not people in order to be successful journalists? I didn't understand that. And I don't know how to treat people other than as other people. So I didn't change anything I did. And then 2 years later, a new sports editor came in, and he's the one that put me on the Dallas Cowboys beat. And I treated them like people and had a very successful career, thankfully. And so I'm very grateful that my sports editor put me on the beat, and that I was able to cover the team when Tom Landry was still there. Now, I was still covering the team when Jerry Jones bought the team. However, I was on maternity leave at the time. They had never had a beat writer on maternity leave before, not even anywhere in the NFL. And so when I went back off maternity leave, now we have Jerry Jones owning the team, Jimmy Johnson as the head coach. A lot of things had changed, and a lot of policies had changed. The curtains went down. They had no more curtains. More restrictive, though we didn't have the freedom to talk to people that we had before. Tom Landry, Tech Schramm used to give us a list. We got a printout of every football player on the roster, their home address and their cell phone and their telephone number. And we were told we could call them anytime we needed quotes. It didn't matter, including all the coaches and the general manager. But that went away when Jerry Jones bought the team, and we couldn't call people as freely, and the access was greatly limited. But that was, my experience was a very positive experience, and I loved it. I got to be close to a sport that I loved, close to a team that I watched growing up. In fact, my freshman year of high school, I made the varsity girls basketball. Well, we call it varsity, but it was not a sanctioned, but we played all over the state. It may as well have been varsity, but I made the A squad. And at the athletic banquet, our guest speaker was Bob Lilly, who was Mr. Cowboy, and the principal of the school asked me to take Bob Lilly around and introduce him to people. So here I am, this little freshman girl taking Bob Lilly all over the table to table, introducing him to people at our athletic banquet. That was a big thrill for me. And now all of a sudden I'm covering the team and I've gotten to know Bob Lilly, even though he didn't play anymore. And so it was a great experience. So yeah, we still have 3 minutes. So if there are a couple of questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Marjorie, can you expound a little bit on your phrase, I treated them like people? Because essentially your experience is like what we are experiencing in the workplace right now, whether as peers or with our clients or patients.
Okay, yes, treating them like people is what I mean by that is I think everybody, no matter if you're making millions of dollars as a professional athlete or you're a billionaire CEO of a Fortune 500 company, I never forgot that you're a human being and that you should always be treated with dignity, not just a big story, regardless of how damaging it might be, and sensational. I did not lean toward the sensational just to get more readers or anything like that. I kept fairness and truth, honesty but truth. Sometimes the truth could be hurtful in a way that, like, I had to write about when Tony Dorsett was losing his position to Herschel Walker, but I wasn't doing it in a way that could be seen as disrespectful or mean. I never wanted to be mean. So I stuck to the facts a lot of time and gave everybody a chance to talk and give their side of how things look. And let me say, one time Tony Dorsett, the night that he lost his starting position, here he is, a Heisman winner at the University of Pittsburgh, and now he loses his starting position. He eventually is in the Hall of Fame and everything, but how hard that must have been to lose his starting position. So he left after the game. He didn't stay and be interviewed by the press. And of course, he would get fined for that. But he left. And my sports editor said, "You've got to talk to him. You've got to talk to him. That's your job." And of course, I had the list. I went to his house, knocked on the door. He answered the door. He's like, "Oh my gosh." I said, I know. I don't want to be here. And I know you don't want to talk to me. That's why you left. You didn't want to talk to anybody. But can we just talk a little bit?" And we ended up sitting on the curb of the front yard of his house, and we talked, and he spilled it all out to me and told me how he was feeling. And I wrote the story very in a heartfelt way, not a, "Hey, you're being supplanted by somebody better." Does that answer your question, Arlene?
Yes, thank you. And what you have shared with us is really applicable to our daily lives and how we
Oh, absolutely.
be treating each other.
Yes, yes, never. That was one of the most important things that I've remembered from this whole thing, is that I was told that I would not make it in this business because I wanted to treat people like human beings, and I became successful. In fact, I got a call from NFL Game Day. They used to do a magazine where they would have the same magazine in every stadium across the country once a week. And they asked me to do the lead story opening the season. And I asked them, "Why are you asking me?" And they said, "Because we think you're the best writer in the NFL." So how did I get that? 98 in 87, when I had been covering it for a year, because I treated them like people. I don't think I was any great writer. I think there are a lot of great reporters and writers out there, but maybe it was just the human element that kind of made the difference.
Thank you. That's a very good reminder for us. And how did you know that the players were reading your articles?
They would
You
mention
mentioned that.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They'd say, "Oh," because you quote other people too. So they'd say, "Oh, coach said that, I'm ready for the next game," or, something like that. And I'd laugh and I go, "Oh, you guys always say you don't read them, but we know you do." They would laugh.
Thank you. I understand that you published a book, When the Men Were Gone.
Yes, yes,
Can
I
you
did.
tell us more a little bit about your book?
Okay, so I go to the doctor to get my allergy testing done, and the nurse sees that I'm wearing a t-shirt that says the University of Tulsa football, my daughter's alma mater. And she says to me, my great aunt was a football coach. And I was like, what? And she said, my great aunt was a football coach in Texas during World War II. And I asked her where, and she said Brownwood, Texas. And in Texas, Brownwood has won, everybody here knows Brownwood has won 7 state championships and has a great high school legacy in high school football. So I asked her if I could write the story of her aunt, and she said yes. The story I was going to write was a biography, but too much of her story had been lost to time. So my research gave me a lot of information, but I ended up writing it as a novel. So it's a novel based on a true story of Tylene Wilson when she when she coached football in Brownwood, Texas during World War II. And that's why it's called When the Men Were Gone, because she stepped up into a role. And it's about her journey. It's really, the story covers 2 weeks of her journey to becoming the football coach and then the beginning of the season. And it's now with Mandalay Pictures in development. They're making a movie of this book.
Wow,
Oh, well, thank you,
congratulations.
Linda. Yes, you would make it. I hope so. Go see it. Tell all your friends.
So what will be the title of the movie? The same? When
Well,
the
they
Men
told me that they want to keep it the same. So far, the screenplay, the script, everything is the same. If they're at the 11th hour, they change it. I'd have to let everybody know. But at this point, they said they love the title and they're going to keep it.
Thank you. We have one question.
Mhm.
What internal dialogue do you have so that you don't get intimidated with all the big personalities around you?
Wow, that's a good question. I think my mom and dad, they raised me, to all of us, to have a lot of self-confidence. And if we're prepared, then we could go into any venue, any setting, as long as we're prepared. And so and my mom was a great example of that. And my dad too, but I keep saying my mom because we're both females. But so I think what my internal dialogue really was, prior to getting into those environments, I prepared myself to be in them. So then I walked in, I was confident.
Thank you so much. And everyone, do you have any other questions for Marjorie right now? So I guess there are no more questions. So we would like to thank you for your time, Marjorie, and we wish you the best. And we hope to, hear from you again once the movie is out, so we can have
Oh,
like a movie analysis session or something.
that would be a lot of fun. Please do. Yes. Well,
Yes.
thank you, everybody. I see the comments pop up. I really appreciate it. I love the little emojis that are going by. You're, making me feel really good. So I appreciate it. I hope you feel like it was time well spent.
Yes. And again, everyone, please make sure that you complete the survey so that we can post a recommendation for Marjorie. And I have posted the link to the survey. It's right now, it's on the chat. And thank you so much, Marjorie, for your time. And we
Well,
hope to
thank
see
you.
you soon. And
Okay.
by the way, when is the movie coming out? Does it have like an
Well, they're
ETA?
working on the cast right now. So as soon as they can get the lead character and everything, then things will start moving. So I can't tell, but I know who has the script now, and it would be a really good a good Tylene. So I'm hopeful.
Right, right. I'm really interested on who's going to be the main character.
Yes, yes.
And I'm sure you're not allowed to reveal it yet.
I'm
Uh,
not. But boy, when she signs and agrees, we're gonna let the whole world know.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much.
Well,
And
thank
hope to
you.
see you again when the movie